Hello, hello. It's Linda Descant, and welcome to Music as a Metaphor. Today we are in mid-July, and these are pre-recorded shows, so this will air at some date in the future, most likely still July. The big thing in the news cycle right now is the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And while that has been something quite interesting and quite significant to our country and possibly the world, I have found myself very uninterested in being online and looking at every Tom, Dick, and Harry's opinion about what happened. Something's happened to me, and I am just feeling like it's all a bit of a distraction. A distraction from what? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today as we dive into a topic that I never get tired of talking about, and that is music and how we can use music as a metaphor for our own soul spirit awakening, uncovering truth in our lives. Rather than going online and trying to look for the truth there, going inside and looking for the truth of our own lives. And for me, music is such a valuable commodity that each is accessible to each one of us, whether we're listening or participating. And I have had some huge personal shifts in my understanding of truth about personal things and micro to macro. It always feels like it's micro to macro when you have these kind of shifts. So it's personal and actual things that have happened in my life, and macro as in what's going on the bigger stage. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a huge shift I had as it relates to a song in particular that I wrote. And I'm going to share that song first with a little bit of detail about it, and then we'll get into the specifics of how this song helped me to have another full circle moment. Before we do, though, I want to talk about the fact that it is related to my episode number 9, which I finally was able to get up on my YouTube. So when I had first started the show in the spring, I was committed to a week later by around noon or 1 p.m. Eastern, having the previous week's episode up so that you could find not only the live version, you can tune in on freeworld.fm to hear me live on Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern. And then the following week by Tuesday, you could rehear the episode, or you could maybe more regularly just tune in there for my YouTube page, which also features a Friday night video premiere, a music video on all kinds of different stages, but all designed to uplift and inspire you. So I ran into a snag a while back because I had recorded an entire episode live that just glitched out. I've spoken about this on previous episodes, and it kind of freaked me out. Honestly, it freaked me out because I had really gone deep into the concept of spiritual warfare. And when it was over, it really kicked up my own fears about sharing too much, and also a question of discernment, which is something I've been bringing up over and over again in my episodes. And once again, we'll really highlight that today, the idea of discerning what you speak about and what you don't speak about. I have often been very bound up and really have such a tendency to hold back what I speak about, what I share musically speaking. And I'm finding myself, because this is a new frontier, to be talking to an audience, not just doing private lessons or small group lessons where I've become much more comfortable teaching. One of the reasons is I've always had a knack for sort of feeling where I can go with somebody as far as their spiritual understanding. I guess it's a gift. I think it's somewhat a result of being an empath. And if you've studied anything about empaths, it's just another survival technique, right? This is something I want to talk about in this episode too, is how there's many times when we're facing traumas. Many of us have faced traumas when we're very, very young and ill-equipped to handle them as a mature human being. And so oftentimes there's one of two responses to severe trauma. One of them can be the narcissist that sort of cuts off their feelings and doesn't feel anything at all and sort of lives in a surface persona where everything's okay. And that's definitely a survival technique, whether or not you want to vilify narcissists or not. Many of them have, vacated their bodies or vacated their lives because of very, very severe trauma as a child. But another reaction is to feel very deeply, go the other way and feel incredibly deeply, not only your own emotions, but the emotions of everybody around you as a way to try to, see things coming, right? It's almost like a temperature gauge. So I've always been able to feel very deeply and feel what other people feel around me. And in many cases, I've had to work very hard to write that boundary, because sometimes it is a psychic gift, I guess, but I also feel that it's really something that if you pay attention to it, it grows. And so empaths, when they were young, for whatever reason, paid more and more attention to it. And other people maybe didn't. And if maybe you were lucky enough to not have severe trauma as a child, then maybe you never had quite the survival need to tune in on that level. And so you might be a bit more numbed out. But I do believe it's a skill that we all have, the way I feel like we all have musical abilities as well. It's just what we're tapped into. And because of that ability to feel the room, to really, I can read a room, okay? And so when I'm teaching, it was one of my strengths. When I'm in the room with somebody, even in the room with a group, it's very clear to me how far to go, when to speak in parables, how, if somebody's understanding, when to go deeper in this concept. Being in these type of formats online has been much more difficult because I feel like I'm operating blind. I don't know who I'm speaking to. Maybe if I had a more heightened gift of psychic ability, or maybe I will develop one through this, this outlet, using this outlet to teach, because my intention is to connect with the people that I'm speaking with today. It's just that we're dealing with an entirely different situation, right? It's through time. There's no distance, there's no time. So it's much more on a quantum level, and it's much more tapping into a faith that I'm saying what needs to be said without there being any sort of biofeedback in the moment to steer me. And so that has brought up a lot of insecurities and anxieties about saying too much or saying too little, but it's interesting because when I was having a moment of reflection yesterday, I was going back and listening to and working through some of my own compositions, some of my older pieces, as I was working on copywriting some and copywriting a new piece that I'll be debuting soon. And as I was doing that, I was recognizing like how vulnerable I used to feel releasing music, whereas now it feels so safe. Like I can basically say anything and everything I want through music, and even in these music videos, and it's such a wonderful outlet for me. And I don't really have the fear around it. But I remembered how, for a decade, it was a long time ago, but for a very long time, I struggled. Every time I was about to release music, it was just very, very hard. And it's still there a little bit. I'm still dealing with that on a certain level, but it's come up now more with, here, what I'm going to say here. And so when that happened, I've been honest about the fact that it just sort of made me question whether or not I was being discerning enough. I mean, this is a new muscle for me to really be here every week talking for an hour and working through the discernment of what to speak about and what not to speak about. And in that process, I sort of got blocked and quit. Took a little bit of a pause after episode 9. I'm glad that I refocused at that point more on music, keeping music central here, because like I said, it became very clear to me that that's the one topic that I could show up here over and over again and continue to discuss, whereas I have little mini interests that I'll get into here and there, but they don't last as long. Music is my love of a lifetime, and that's why I'm showing up here. So that discernment is becoming more clear. But when I go back and listen to my previous episodes, I don't hear that there's as much in there that I was like, oh, I shouldn't share that. That's too spiritual or that's too much. I don't know who I'm speaking to here today, but this is where I have my shield of faith that it's going to go out and land on the right ears, and that those that don't need to hear it, will not be on their frequency, and they won't even pick it up, because I have to have a certain level of authenticity here. That's the only way I've ever been able to stand in my authority, is by being rooted in the moment and allowing things in the moment. Whereas when I'm holding back, that is truly coming from a spirit of fear. And that spirit of fear can be harboring a lot worse things inside of it, is what I'm sort of recognizing now. So I've lacked in some ways. Some of me holding back has truly been from fear and a lack of courage. And it's been me trying to control an outcome where I have to. Instead, I've been called, and part of my shift is to trust a lot more. Trust has been this lifelong theme that I'll continue to do, of just trusting God, trusting the Spirit, not needing to understand and control everything from an intellectual level, but, walking in faith and what that really feels like. Because I talked briefly about it last week, the idea of jamming up the frequency. And that was sort of recognizing that everywhere you go, you're meant to be there. And I heard I shared this on my Instagram, this guy talking about how everybody that we're on the planet with right now, like, it's not, it's special to even be alive in the same time period. He was talking about how many people have, every 100 years, there's an entirely new set of people on the earth. So why not think about how amazing it is that when you run into somebody on the street, or you see this person, that they're alive with you at this time, and you guys are sharing this experience at the same time. And just sort of living the moment fully. And in that same way, it can be extended to every place you go. There's so much time, and your time here on earth is so short. And so we get into these mundane, just get here and there, and maybe our minds are a million miles away thinking about this or thinking about that. But when you're fully present in your life, it's incredible what's unfolding right before your eyes, that in many ways has nothing to do with your conscious efforts. That's the magic and mystery of, love unfolding in your life. And when you're able to tune into that vibration, which is maybe like a fifth dimensional vibration, or as I spoke about last week, like having the heavens open, having the third heaven open, and walking through this earth with sort of this divine outlook on everything you do. And when you're in that space, when you're walking in that space, when you're living in that space, you're not always going to feel that. Your emotions are not your temperature gauge of how you're doing, how aligned you are. There are times when the fruit of the Spirit come through, and there's joy, and there's love, and there's patience. Those are the long-term goals of living more and more from that space. But in the meantime, you could also be having a variety of emotions that come up. And this is the big deciphering, the big bit of wisdom that I've learned after many, many years of going through this. And I want to save other people decades of time, that you do need to feel to heal. And we're going to talk about that today with this song. You do have to feel to heal. You cannot bypass your emotions altogether. You cannot make them nothing. And unfortunately for narcissists who have completely disassociated, you are at a disadvantage to get back in touch with your soul and your spirit, because from the higher planes, emotions, I believe, can be a language of our soul. But okay, and here's the but. It's not everything, right? It's a very rough communication, and you can't, there's a place that I'm shifting into, a maturity level and a wisdom where your emotions are only one part of who you are, and you recognize that they can be like the weather, like shifting and changing all the time. And so if you put too much of an emphasis on them being a compass to guide you, then they can really get you off. They can be incredibly deceptive. They can really pull you in particular fashions, places that you do not want to go. And one of the reasons I was talking about this, there has to be the ability of learning to control your emotions, feeling them and healing them in very healthy ways, such as composing a song about something, playing a song, giving yourself, or journaling, giving yourself ways that you can deal with these emotions so that they don't get pent up and then, come out in very destructive, angry, triggered ways. So that's what happened when I went back. I was finally just able to start reposting episodes. Right now I'm recording episode 20, but on my YouTube, I just posted episode 9. And when I listened to it, there wasn't anything. I was like, oh, I shouldn't put this up for the public. But what was more interesting is that it was talking about a moment that I got triggered about 3 months ago. Now, it was a very important event in my life, and I'm not going to speak about specifics of it, but I am going to try to talk in terms of why and how this is the why and the how of using music for these type of scenarios so that you can fully heal. This is the great work because, number one, and you will hear on episode 9 if you go back on my YouTube and listen, I was triggered by an event, and the day that I recorded episode 9, it was actually like 6 hours later. Now, I do feel like I lost my cool. I was triggered. I had a voice in my head that was like, stay quiet, just feel, and I bubbled up and I said something, and while it could have been way worse, it wasn't great that I sort of allowed myself to, in a triggered moment, speak in a very undisciplined way, and it led to a conflict, but more so it led to deep regret and guilt on my part. So that episode was kind of talking myself through, not beating myself up about it, and trying to recognize that what is intended for evil, God will use for good, and kind of trying to admit that I was wrong to do that. But at the same time, what it did show me was how much anger and bitterness I had about this particular scenario, because I knew I was going into a scenario knowing I could get triggered, and I still couldn't control it. So I was very humbled. And in that humility, it's led to 3 months since then of me dealing with the anger and the bitter and the resentment. And and this is why you cannot allow emotions to take over too much, because in that process, it was tainting my entire world. It was making me really get into a spirit of paranoia. And I was recoiling. I was definitely recoiling. And there were signs that I wasn't coming from, the most enlightened place about it. But it also felt very clear that it was a moment to accept myself and to allow myself to feel this way. And it was a lot. I was really honestly dealing with it quite a bit. Now, I never took action on it. It was just, I'm proud of that I didn't really speak with anybody about it, in a way that would come back to me, because some of it was a certain viewpoint that I had to talk out, that I had to really see that this is how I felt, this is how I thought about it. And I was pretty certain, and I was doubling down that this is exactly how I felt. And I recognized that I was wrong in that triggering moment, but what I was happy about was that it had uncovered that I thought this way and I felt this way. And it was a lot of victimization, honestly. It was a lot of feeling victimized by scenarios. But I had to go through it, okay? And the reason that I bring this up is because just about 3 or 4 days ago, I was out in the wilderness, and I don't know what happened. Suddenly a shift came in, and it was like 3 or 4 things at once were coming in and just making me think, well, maybe not. Maybe that's been my misperception this whole time. And it's been leading to this bitterness, and it's been leading to this anger. But I maybe unfairly looked at the situation, and my heart was opening. And that was a big difference. Like all this time that I've been sort of mulling over this event that I got triggered about and mulling over all this angerness and this bitterness that did need to come to the surface, did need to be expressed. At the same time, it didn't feel peaceful. And for the first time, when I allowed this thought, like maybe I've been wrong about this, or maybe this is bigger than just my personal grievances on it, suddenly an expansion came in, a love came in. It felt like my heart space was opened. And it wasn't that I was wrong about anything, okay? There was things that I had a legitimate reason to have grievances, which is why it was fair to kind of have this 3 months to mull over some of those things and think through them and be really clear about how I reacted to them and how I felt about them. But that wasn't the whole story. And that's what, by coincidence, as I'm sort of within 24 hours of sort of having this opening when I was out in nature and starting to think, well, maybe, then I sat down and played the song that I had written that related to this triggering event and this theme in my life. And I had written it 3 or 4 years ago. And it just broke me open completely. It furthered the entire shift and transformation of this scenario, and it gave me a different perspective on it. And so I want to play that song for you right now and then continue the discussion. This song has actually not been officially released, so you won't find it on my, on Bandcamp, which is a great place to support me downloading my music for $1. That's my officially released music, but I'm soon to start doing my own releases. So that will be happening more, but on Spotify, on Apple Music, you can find, more of my officially released music. This one you won't find anywhere. The only place you'll find it is on my YouTube, where I did do a video because it was a lot about healing. It's a self-produced version that I actually have decided I don't like as much as when I actually produced it. I'm going to maybe do a more stripped down version of it, but it was what I felt at the time. And so I'm going to play it for you now. It's actually gone through several different titles as well. But I believe where I landed was called A Second Chance. So we're going to listen to this song. You can also see the video on my YouTube if you would like. And then during this 5 minutes of this song, I'd really like you to practice your active listening and just really try to stay focused on the music, the words. Allow yourself to see what it brings up in your own body, how you might react emotionally and physically to it. And then we're going to discuss on the flip side.
We were not wanted by our mother, encased with the traumas so buried, so ignored, one empty life, all for show. Pretty girls raised to hate the idea of motherhood, too much drama, too much fear, and too little love and affection. A lifetime of broken, a terrible person born but out of you. I forgive you, I forgive all of it. Nothing could be done to me now that hasn't been. no good opinions to uphold. I have fallen far so thankfully, a humble person born again, with words to write, a lifetime of broken, a terrible person born but out of you. I forgive you, I forgive all of it. Striving for perfect, but it never worked out, and I was so lost too. I forgive you, I forgive all of it. We are now the ones in control, to choose our hearts, to hear our souls, a second chance.
So that's my original song with the final title of A Second Chance, and I guess that really did end up being the best title, because this is what's interesting, when we're really creating from a higher place, and I wouldn't say from the second heaven or fourth dimension place, where most of our popular music is coming from. They'll talk about muses, but we're talking about coming from more of that dimension, which typically ends up being about like sex and lust and somehow enslaving people on some level through that sort of inspiration. This is, I think the true motive of creativity is to free people, and that's got to come from a higher place. That has to come from a more pure place, or maybe the third heaven, fifth dimension. That's how you would describe it, a higher frequency where it frees you of the bondage. And that's what this song did. So that's what I want to speak to, is the power of music. This is one example of how the time that I put forth to write this song, how powerful it is in my own life. And so, let me just explain that when I wrote this song, it was years ago, and it was over, a situation that's been very difficult for me for a very long time. It's probably, as I would say, one of my biggest crosses to bear, and something that's bothered me a lot. I've prayed a lot about it. I've done a lot of emotional work about it, and it continues to be a trigger, right? So that's where triggers can show us exactly the areas that we need to work on. We don't want to be triggered, right? And hopefully someday I'll be somebody has more self-discipline and self-control. My triggers, I lose it a lot less than at one point I might. And so then the good thing about having self-control when triggers come up is that you don't have to deal with the repercussions. You can just get right to the source of what triggered you. Why did you even feel that emotional reaction? And by not over-identifying with the feelings, it doesn't take you over. It's just something that you feel, and you don't have to react. You don't have to talk about it, right? Over-identifying with feelings would mean that it takes you over, and that's when I do think that you can become susceptible to being taken over by many things, right? Emotions are just one of the tools that can be used to get you to kind of give up the reins through temper, through all kinds of things, right? And I had given a warning, I believe, on the last episode about how right now so many people are are being triggered, number one. We've just been primed to be triggered in so many ways, but they don't have the discipline and the ability to control themselves when they get triggered. And so it's something that we always want to be working on, because I've always been somebody that has big emotions, which is a new term they like to discuss for children coming in now, but I didn't have a term for it. I just had very big emotions. And And so I've been working for a long time, and this time the trigger moment I had, I didn't explode, I didn't go crazy, but it was clear there was something there. And in exploring the trigger, spending time with it over the last 3 months, it was, a shift did happen, and I had to rifle through the perspective and the emotions because of a shift that had happened in me. And it was a shift that just kind of said no more. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why. I don't know why I was finally ready. It's probably all the work I did. Maybe it was divine healing. Maybe it was my prayers. Suddenly, even before I had gotten triggered, there had been a shift in me where I just said no more, which is why the trigger surprised me. It was like, bummer. Like, it's still there. It's still bothering me. But I think it was one of the last festerings that I had to face. And then, like I mentioned, suddenly life brought me completely full circle in the last 4 days. By first, I was out in nature. I was exposed to a movie and a friend and some advice that suddenly just made me think for a second, like, hey, maybe my perspective has been tainted by this bitterness. Maybe I haven't been seeing things exactly right. And I was finally willing to get out of the victim mentality of it, which is so tempting, right? Because it's weird how we play like victims, but it's really about feeling powerful. And I had needed to feel that power so I could say, hey, it's enough on this scenario, right? It's enough for feeling the pain. It's enough for feeling that I'm being controlled by it. And at the same time, recognizing that, not vilifying myself as a terrible person because I was still feeling the pain or I was still being controlled by a certain scenario. It was a level of compassion for myself. So the victim was in there, and I'm not going to, go on and on about what I've been mulling over, but I feel like it was all pertinent to me getting to a place where I was finally like, okay, I don't want to play the victim anymore. I'm willing to say, hey, I'm going to take responsibility for my part in this. And it's not in a codependent way and this is maybe why it's taken me so long to rifle through, because I have the codependent side to take responsibility for everybody. And that's the part that I've had enough of. I'm not willing to do that. This person came to the table doing these things, but I also have my things I need to take responsibility for, right? And I could have reacted a different way. And in this humility, this moment of humility, I was with a very wise woman who said, that's actually what maturity is things that we were just so certain of for decades. All of a sudden we're willing to go, wait, I don't know, maybe not. And I loved that. It was such a humble moment for her to admit that in reality, maturing as a human being does mean the ability to admit when we're wrong. And that's a topic I'll come back to. But for the moment, staying on topic with this song. So I had that moment. I came back from the weekend. I was working. I was at a piano. I had decided to go through my own compositions. And sure enough, I came across this one. Now, another event happened on Monday that furthered this particular scenario. So now there's all these coincidences happening in a row of things that are sort of making me face this and see it differently, and then even deal with it on a level of like, okay, now how am I going to take action on it? Like immediately I was put in a position where I needed to make some decisions regarding this place where I've just been sort of in my own world festering on it, not really having to face anything in the last 3 months. And when I came to my compositions, I realized that I hadn't played this song in a while. And I decided to play it. And it was this song, A Second Chance. And when I played it, and I got to the chorus about I forgive you, I forgive all of it, my heart completely melted. And I was finally able to really feel that forgiveness. And this time the forgiveness wasn't just for the other person or the perceived wrongs that had happened to me. It was also for my part in it. And so it was crazy because it was me talking to myself, right? And it was me, I guess, once again, being a mantra for myself, writing this years ago, but the emotional unraveling of it, the layers of it, the ability to release the anger and the trauma and the resentment that I wasn't even willing to face that I had, it took a while. It took a few years. And I really have, like I said, I have not thought of this song. I mean, many times I write a song and I forget, honestly, that I've even written it. I've written a lot of songs at this point. And this one, in that moment, was the song to play. The message was so clear. And it brought me full circle. It was another full circle moment that I'm so thankful for. And it's amazing to me how songs can be that powerful. They can just, be outside of time in a way. It was as if no time had passed, except everything had changed since then. And the shift had occurred. The song was showing me that the shift had occurred, because in this particular moment, I melted. It ensued that I had a few hours of crying. There was some grief at letting go, because a lot of the bitterness wasn't towards any one person in reality. It was towards life and the circumstances, and wishing things could have been different, which is sometimes at the bottom of so much of what we don't want to admit to ourselves or face. It was sort of running me under the scene, like it should have been like this. And it was actually like this. So I felt anger. And then underneath that anger, I finally got to grief. But then underneath the grief was the realization of, in reality, it's okay that it wasn't this other way. It does feel in a certain sense when you have traumas happen that a certain reality gets stolen from you, and you can always wonder, you can spend the rest of your life wondering what that other reality would have been. But in many ways, it won't allow you to be empowered and to really connect in the moment with your spirit, who can renew you and restore you and redeem you no matter what your past is. And that's what this song said. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the lyrics, not all of the lyrics, but like I said, the chorus is, I forgive you, I forgive all of it. And I want to encourage anyone who's having a scenario in their life that they need to forgive, to use this song, to use that particular line. It is so powerful. It goes right straight into your heart. And once again, remember that forgiveness can be at the root of everything, because it can help us to get that second chance. If we're being haunted by things in our past and we want to let them go, then forgiveness is what we have to do. And many times forgiveness is not as easy as like, oh, I want to forgive somebody, right? It can be years and years of intending to forgive somebody. In my own personal instance, I came to forgiveness because and through the message of Jesus. That was one of his biggest messages to people, about forgiving, being on the cross and forgiving his perpetrators, saying they know not what they do. And part of the reason that forgiveness has come so important again is that for many of us whose spiritual gifts are coming online, and we're starting to really decipher the difference between people we love, people in our lives, versus when they're sort of being taken over by entities. And this sort of spiritual game we're in, and recognizing that it's not really about the people at all, right? And as we're standing more in our spiritual authority, how do we really differentiate that? How do we really remain loving and remain have a real relationship with people, whilst having the boundaries up to and not allow any influences they might be having that they're not even aware of to affect us. And so forgiveness, I know not what they do. It's kind of that, right? So that's why I find this message so powerful. And it was exactly what I really wasn't doing the last 3 months, as I was ruminating. And if I had continued to go that direction, I think there'd be certain consequences on my life. But instead, this song reminded me that it was about forgiveness, and it was about letting all of it go so that I can have a different life. Because it's one thing to have something stolen from you as a girl. It's another thing to let the rest of your life be stolen because you keep ruminating on that, right? The bitterness in your heart holds you to things that long ago could have been over. And that God has given me so many second chances, honestly. And I believe I'm now being offered one in this scenario. The other thing is the empowerment of the bridge. It's there is nothing that could be done to me now that hasn't been, and no good opinion to uphold. And then it goes into the next verse, which is, I've fallen far, so thankfully a humble person born again with words to write. So this is the second chance that I feel like I'm being offered, is the ability to recognize that being humbled is actually a really good thing in this world that we're living in. And this leads into a discussion that I want to have about one of the biggest blocks that I'm seeing to people in music and in life, and that's perfectionism. And where does perfectionism come from? It's largely associated with pride, which is largely connected with not being able to admit that we're wrong. And we're going to unpack all that more. But the truth is, I've had circumstances in my life that absolutely did not go the way that I wanted it to go. Okay, absolutely. But in reality, it was such a gift to me because it gave me freedom. And the freedom that I had was the freedom from the good opinion of others and the freedom from my own pride. You know, being locked into patterns and locked into ways of being that in reality aren't really, they make you miserable, honestly. But you're locked into them because of your pride and because you don't want to admit you're wrong, or all kinds of things. So that's what I'm really writing about there. And it's also the idea that nothing could be done to me now that hasn't been. It's taking all of the things that I could be victimized and instead turning them into an empowerment, like a training. Like, I do truly feel like I've been well trained for this particular time that we live in, because I have faced so many personal tragedies, so many traumas. I've faced so many things that have forced me to absolutely go inward and do the work on myself, but also to really create a relationship with God. And I still have a very long way to go, but I think truthfully I was somebody who could be way off the mark at this point if a lot of things had gone the way that I wanted them to. I think my ego would be off the charts. I have to be honest about that. And I know that because my ego was off the charts when I was young. And even when you have what I'm still getting rid of here, which is a very low self-esteem, an insecurity, can still all really be based on being too self-focused. And that's all ego, right? And the victimization, that's ego. So my life circumstances, I consider a blessing. I see them as a blessing. I choose to see them as a blessing because I feel empowered by the things that I've gone through, that I've owned them, and that I've done the best I can to turn them into lemonade, not, hold on to the bitterness of how unfair it all was. And that's a lot of what this song is about. It's me, and that's a lot of what these 3 months have been about, is me taking responsibility and recognizing, acknowledging things that have happened in my life, not burying them under the rug and being afraid of the emotions, but then not allowing the emotions to overtake me, using them instead in this way where I was able to express on Monday night for a while through a song I had written. A past self, myself 3 or 4 years ago, wrote this song for this me 3 or 4 years later. That was at the perfect moment. And I was led to it because I didn't even remember it. Like I said, and I haven't been doing this a whole lot, but I've got my, notebook. I have a trusty notebook, several of them, but as I go through life, I have a notebook where I keep my songs. And it's one of my biggest tidbits to songwriters out there, is to have a song notebook and write them down. Have it be part of your process. That's a great episode for us to talk more about songwriters' processes. But this is exactly why, because this song was not on my mind at all. But I have this notebook, and I was like, you know what? I'm itching to write some new music, and I have one song that's sort of starting to come through. And I just sort of felt the need to go back and visit some of my other ones and kind of focus on my original songs rather than on covers. And suddenly, lo and behold, I run across the perfect song to play that night. It was a comfort to me, and then it was cathartic to me, and then it had the message I needed to hear, which was, hey. it's time to forgive. It's time to let all of that go, because what is in store for me at this point is so much bigger and so much more expanded than that. And it's time to allow this to alchemize into something beautiful. That's what this creative work is about. Okay, it's great if you can get it to make you money and bring you fame. But more important is, can it help you to become the person you're meant to be? And can you help to turn the trauma and the ugliness and the pain in this world into something beautiful? Can you be an alchemist? Can you shift? It very much feels supernatural when you do it. It very much feels like a miracle. And that's what's happened. That's what's happened in my life. And this is just one of many miracles. This is just one of many songs, right? So yeah, that's the power of music. That is the power of your creative practice. I've shared this story on 2 levels today. It's for those of you who are songwriters or musicians to have a very solid example of how this music can help us on our spiritual journey in a very real and tangible way, a very helpful way. But also for those who might be experiencing these things in their life, and either they're a musician or they're not a musician, and that this song now is encoded with all of this, the energy of my own transformation and my own miracle I share through this song now. It's funny because I actually I was talking early in this podcast about being more organized with my music, and when I went to share a copy of this on here, I realized I didn't actually have a copy. I have it somewhere, but it wasn't readily available to find the copy of the production that I'd put up on YouTube, which, like I said, you can see this song on my YouTube channel, A Second Chance, and a video that I made. And it was a production that I felt good about at the time, but I'm not driving with the production at this point. So when I recognized I couldn't readily just find an MP3 of that production, I went through and took out the drums. So the version that I played on this podcast didn't have the drums in it. It was more of a, just piano, an instrumental, or not instrumental, but sort of chamber music type sound. It has an accordion in it. And that's more what I was feeling this week with it, because that's what I'd actually played on the piano when the song really hit me hard. It was just me playing on the piano and singing. And so I was happy to more share that version, but also the vocals I didn't quite have the vocals organized. I didn't have my Logic Pro final copy. So instead I just sort of, the kind of raw vocals that I just put a little bit of a filter on and shared it. And there was a section in there where I broke down crying even then, whenever I recorded the vocals. And it's funny, is I almost left that in for, to show the authenticity of the performance, that in the instrumental break, I was sobbing as I was singing the song. And then here, I took it out because it also had like some, knocking of the, that type of stuff. Just took it out really quick. And then here I am sobbing here today. So my apologies for the emotional breakdown here that I'm having. But it's just to, hopefully in a very heartfelt way, demonstrate how healing music can be, how cathartic, what a comfort. And I think the truth is that even though I'm shifting every day, I'm still sort of feeling what I would call like aftershocks. Sometimes when you have a really, really big emotional, mental shift, then it takes a while for everything to sort of fall into place. You might find yourself going back to something, and now it no longer matches this new vibration of the shift. And so it can feel like an aftershock. Suddenly you're feeling it. And I was feeling that, honestly. This week has had some surprises, had some really big surprises that I've been dealing with. And I felt very equipped to deal with them after I had that cathartic experience Monday night with this song. And the last 2 days have proved nothing short of a miracle, and things happening, and everything felt very lined up. But it was very much a testament of walking in faith, because I still had to put aside all of the thoughts and the opinions and the things about it and recognize, like, hey, maybe I've been wrong, and maybe I need to come to this with fresh eyes. And life gave me this perfect situation to do that in real time. And I wasn't even as afraid as I thought I would be. I felt more brave, I felt more courage, but there was still some low level fear there, right? And then now finally today I'm able to sit down and do this episode, which has been tricky because life has been going, and I was really wanting to record yesterday and wasn't able to. And so here I am sitting down today to do it. And as I was sitting down, my microphone didn't work, and it started to feel like that same old, like, my frequency getting jammed up over here, right? And my feelings weren't really into it. Once again, like, I wasn't really feeling inspired to sit here and have this episode, but it was literally the only time I'll be able to do it. So I did, and then guess what happened? Even in discussing the song, hearing again, talking with you about this today, I was able to break through yet another aftershock of it. And so it just feels like a very permanent shift is taking place in me. And I am more in the observer role because it is so new and it's so different. And it's really showing me how clearly many of my thoughts and opinions about certain scenarios in my life have been based in fear. And I am slaying that demon of paranoia and fear that's been on my back. And because of that, I have to come to everything with new eyes. I have to be willing to accept that I don't know. I have to be humble. And sometimes the observer is really the best way to do that, right? And the message that's come through very strongly is silence. Be quiet. In all of everything that's happened in the last 4 or 5 days, something also came very clear, and it was the Bible passage in, I believe it's Isaiah, about the cherubim putting the coal on his lips and purifying. And that's very much what I feel like, that my thoughts are being purified, and as they're being purified, I really need to be silent. I really need to be quiet. And it's not just a question of not triggering other people, which is what I would have thought, honestly, when I first got that message. I was like, oh, well, don't trigger other people. They're not ready to hear your truth. But it was like, no, it's also because you need to simmer down over there a little bit, humble yourself a little bit, recognize that there's a lot going on that you don't know, and be okay with the not knowing. You can feel safe whilst not knowing. Okay, that's sort of the space that I'm coming from today, and slaying all of the demons of paranoia, because really, in reality, what is paranoia? In many ways, it's about trying to control your scenario. And why you're trying to control your scenario, it's probably because you're afraid, right? You're not able to just truly trust that, like the sparrows, were being cared for. So that sort of wraps up today's episode and message. And I hope that you will check out the video. And if you're interested in getting a copy of this particular song to have like a more stripped down version, then go ahead and DM me on my socials, because I'm working on trying to make some of these songs that I'm not officially going to release on like Spotify, etc., to start to make them accessible on my Bandcamp. And, to me, they're prescriptions. They're things that I'm sharing from a perspective of if you can relate, if you are an energetic match for what I'm speaking of and what I'm going through, and this song can help you in any way, then I'm happy to share it with you. So please get in touch about that. Going forward, there was another, let me see where it is. Okay, there was one more lyric that I want to share from this song, and it's important because next episode is going to be all about this block of perfectionism. And it came up here in this song because it's the chorus is a lifetime of broken, a terrible person, born but out of view. Okay, really, at the time that I wrote it, I was speaking about somebody else, but in reality, when I'm singing it now, the terrible person is me. But out of view, it means like, but held back, right? Like not really being honest. Not for much of my life, I was not able to be authentic about who I was and what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And so that's what the idea is. A lifetime of broken, a terrible person, born but out of view. And then I forgive you, I forgive all of it, right? And then there's a second chorus that goes, striving for perfect, but if it never worked out, and I was so lost too. And that is the truth. And all those years of inauthenticity that I lived, I was striving for perfect. I was trying to be some ideal. And in reality, it was a block. It kept me from doing music. It kept me from doing a lot of things that I wanted to do. And so we're going to talk about that next week, because perfectionism is the biggest block that I have seen to music, and I would relate music as a metaphor also in people's lives. It's a huge block to them living authentically. So we're going to talk about that, the episode, and many episodes. I'm sure that's going to be more than one episode, but I just wanted to mention that, and I just wanted to say that this is a really great thing to say to yourself. I was so lost too. For many of us, it's not just about us repenting. It's about wanting people we love to repent, to sort of see, wanting our country to repent, wanting people to recognize the deception that many of us have been part of and to wake up from it. And so I love this line, because when people come to us, maybe our egos want to say, like, I told you so, and I've known this the whole time, and I'm a victim of all these people, like, not getting it. But in reality, the truth is we've all been pretty lost, and it's just a matter of time, whether you woke up 20 years ago or if somebody wakes up 20 years from now. The point is to wake up for as many of us as possible. So I think this is a very lovely gesture, is the thought, like, hey, I was so lost too. I love that line in the song. So anyway, I forgive you, I forgive all of it. So excuse me, I think I'm gonna go cry for a little while longer. This is music as a metaphor. I'm Lyndall Descant, and I hope that you are out there able to be renewed and restored with each day.